Hello, everyone. My name is Danny, and this review is for Paul, Apostle of Christ. Paul, Apostle of Christ. Paul, who goes from the most infamous persecutor of Christians to Christ's most influential apostle, is spending his last days in a dark and bleak prison cell awaiting execution by Emperor Nero. Luke, his friend and physician, risks his life when he ventures into Rome to visit him. Paul is under the watchful eye of Mauritius, the prison's prefect, who seeks to understand how this broken old man can pose such a threat. But before Paul's death sentence can be enacted, Luke resolves to write another book, one that details the beginnings of the Way and the birth of what will come to be known as the Christian Church. Their faith challenged an empire, but their words changed the world. This is a 2018 movie, I believe. It's rated PG-13, and it runs 107 minutes. It stars Jim Caviezel and Olivier Martinez. Yep. One of many Christian movies to be going Hollywood, and I don't always appreciate what they do with them, but I do always try and give them a try and see if they're biblically accurate and see if they appeal to the Christian masses in any way. So I'll get to my notes here, but I tend to like these movies as long as they're accurate. I just don't know why we have to have so many. The first thing I wrote down is about this Emperor Nero. He served in Rome, 67 AD. I wanted to remember that, and I wanted to talk about it because this has to deal with AD, after Jesus is, on the cross and rising again for Easter and all that. This is towards the end of one of the more famous stories in the Bible about Paul being converted from a massacre of Christians to being a follower of Jesus Christ and having his name changed to show that symbolism. And this is towards the end of his life, as the movie sleeve says, and the struggle he's going through. Saul ends up being a pretty interesting villain in the Bible, and Paul is even a more interesting disciple. So I thought this was kind of a different way to handle a Christian movie. Most of the time, everybody assumes that Jesus has to be in the film. Not necessarily. So I thought this movie kind of handled it well, and it was about an interesting time of the Roman Empire. It's brutal, very brutal, but it was very interesting to do the movie that way. And then when the movie starts, this ends up being mostly about this character, Luke. And I can only assume that they're talking about the Luke that wrote the Luke chapter of the Bible. So I didn't really appreciate it being about Luke the whole time, but I guess he was on this mission to get to Paul. So I guess it's fine. There have been some other movies like this and everything, and I just was like, why focus on the side character if it's about the main character? A lot of people have problems with that when they make movies like this and they focus on this, second guy. I think this was handled okay because you have to kind of hang in there through half of the movie, and then the second half is pretty much about Paul, but Luke ends up being the main character in this movie, and I'm sorry to say if they meant to do that or not. But he's an interesting guy, and he handles things well, and he has some great lines to deliver. And so I guess it's okay that it's about Luke, but I just wish they would have called it, something else. If it's not about Paul the entire time and every situation's not about Paul and the ending of things, then why call it Paul? This supposed general that questions why Paul's being detained, like he's not a threat, and he goes through some emotional stuff with him. It doesn't show him being converted to being a Christian, but he gets kind of on that way. So uh, I cannot understand him. I don't know why they cast somebody like that into that role. He's supposed to be brutal. He's supposed to be headstrong. He's supposed to be sure of himself. He's supposed to, deliver orders and follow orders appropriately. This guy is none of those things, and I can't understand him most of the time. I feel like he's Italian or something. He has that accent that just cannot be understood when he's trying to speak English. I just couldn't understand him. So there's a couple times when he had some emotional things to deliver, and that kind of helped. But mostly, I could not connect with him because I couldn't understand him. One of the great messages this movie has is that love is the only way. It really pushes that, that as persecuted Christians, we cannot retaliate. The only way to change anything in this world is to be kind and to be sure of yourself and confident and show the enemy and those around you what it means to be a symbol of love, so that we can eventually change the world by showing each other what we're supposed to be like. And that's a great message. I don't always understand it as a human being in present day, because things are pretty dark nowadays. And you can be kind to somebody and you can do something nice for someone, but a year later they can not be talking to you. And that's our choice as human beings nowadays, and that's how we kind of handle things, especially here in America. And I have felt that at least this last year. So I'm kind of going through a troublesome time with that, but it is a nice message. And if you watch this movie and you can take something away from that, it really is the main, most important message of the movie. Like I said, the story of Saul and what happens to him, if you don't know from the Bible, he goes down this road. He has a ray of sunshine burn his eyes. He goes blind, and he gets a voice from the sky saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he gets turned into a Christian and gets converted and becomes a leader of the Christians after persecuting them. That story is kind of irrelevant in this film, and I was hoping that they wouldn't tell it, but they did. They took some time to explain it. And so I'm like, I think it was kind of irrelevant to the story because, like I said, most of the time we're talking about Luke or Paul, and that's supposed to be the focus, is what they're going through and what the city's going through. And for them to take time out of their movie to tell that story, which has nothing to do with what we're going through, except that somebody's at the end of their life and you want to focus on one of the greatest things to ever happen to them. That's the only relevancy. That's the only relevancy I can find in that. So I kind of wish they wouldn't have told it. I wish they would have just kept moving and kept forward with the story. Like I said, the city that they're in, Rome, it's just terrible. Like they're almost in civil war, but people are getting massacred in the streets, so it's not really a war. So there's a lot of repeating conversations, about should we get out of the city? Oh no, I think we need to stay. Then they do that conversation about another half an hour later, and Luke's always talking about not leaving Paul's side, and Paul and the general are talking about why he's being detained, and it's kind of the same old conversations, and the repeating of them doesn't really add anything to the movie. It just kind of spins its wheels until it gets to the next major point. So I didn't really appreciate that, I guess. It really does have a simple ending to this movie. The Bible is the Bible. When you make a movie about it, when you try and tell a story, the ending is what the ending is in the Bible. You can't change it, and you can't, do your own version of it. So it's sad and everything, but it is what, the movie was made to be. So I thought they could have, I don't know, done it in a more extravagant way or something. I just thought it was a little bit too simple for how decent of a movie they were making. To have it that simple just kind of was a letdown. And then, like I said, with a lot of these movies, I do have some up here, behind me. I like the Christian movies. I am a Christian. I like watching these. It's good story, what they are trying to tell. I just didn't appreciate the Luke side of things. I didn't appreciate the repeating conversations, but I did like the story and the base of what they were trying to do, and the fact that they didn't need Jesus in a Jesus movie and it survived well by itself. That was kind of cool. So I'd say that the boring action didn't help much in this movie. And if you're looking for some action, I wouldn't watch this because it talks a lot about people being burned and people being beat up and all this stuff, but they don't ever show it. So it's like you're just hearing about it and it's happening, but that's about it. So Paul, Apostle of Christ is a decent movie. I would suggest to watch it because it's biblical and it happens and it tells the truth and it follows what it's supposed to do in the Bible and everything. So I appreciate watching it. I was into it. If you're, have half a brain, you'll enjoy the factual part of it and the history part of it. So I thought it was good. I just didn't know what to expect, and it wasn't a couple of things that I expected it to be. So I'm going to give it a B, and I do suggest watching it. I did enjoy it. So thanks a lot, guys. My name's Danny. If you like this or any of my other video reviews, try and give something to watch. Like and subscribe to my channel if you would. And thanks so much for watching. I'm getting really close to my 200th review, so I really appreciate everybody that subscribes to my channel and has ever watched a video of mine. I'm looking for some changes. If you have any suggestions, I appreciate them. Otherwise, just leave a comment saying hello. Thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy your movies.